Hello YouTube, I am here to record some commentary on my call to John Keller with the Oxnard Internal Affairs. Um, so I'm just going to play the call and pause it at times where there might be something to say regarding what he's doing or what I'm doing tactically and all of that good stuff. So here we go.
Sorry, Keller, Oxnard Police Department.
Hey Keller, this is Robbie. How are you doing?
Good, not bad. Yourself?
I'm alright. I wanted to talk to you about the complaint that I gave to you. I think you wanted to talk to me about it, actually, so I'm just calling you back.
Yes, so this is Robbie Estabrook.
Yeah, this is Robbie.
Is that how I pronounce your last name, Estabrook?
No, it's fine. You can just call me Robbie.
Okay.
So right here, I just had him call me Robbie because of the name game part of the hustle, so to speak. I try not to identify that I have a last name, even though it's all silly and ridiculous. I just try to just not even go down that avenue. So when they ask me like your last name, it's sort of like they want me to confess to being a so-called legal citizen, basically. And so I just have people call me Robbie because that's how I want to be referred to, not by any legal name.
All right. Yeah, I got your complaint. I looked at the thumb drive information that you provided, and also talked to one of your witnesses that you listed. I don't know what his name is. He had the email, James. Let's see here, James Jr. Chen. That's the one I talked to.
Okay.
So he gave me his perspective of what happened on that particular day. That was January 3rd. And I apologize that the officers detained you for videotaping. They weren't supposed to do that, first of all. And beyond that, we are looking into the matter, and so I appreciate you bringing it to our attention. What other concerns do you have?
So, right here, it's pretty evident that even the guy with Oxnard Internal Affairs understands that the police officers did something wrong. So all of the haters out there who kind of say, well, blah, 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 you were just causing problems, I think it's pretty clear that the police officer was in the wrong here. Well, my main concern is that I can't speak for the other two who were there because I don't know exactly what happened to them or if they were assaulted or battered. Is that the correct verb that you use when you're referring to the battery that happens? Are you considered battered if a person commits the crime of battery against you? So right here, I'm just trying to get the answer to a question regarding what is the proper word to use, because I'm genuinely curious.
Well, I guess it would depend on one's perspective, and
well, no. I'm not asking about a battery happening. I'm asking about the verb that you use because I don't know whether to say, was a person batteried? Were they battered? All I'm asking is if anyone commits the crime of battery against somebody, how do they say what happened to them? Do they say I was battered or batteried against? What's the verb there?
If someone were to be struck by somebody else, you would say, yeah, I was battered.
Okay, great. So my biggest point of concern is the fact that two police officers, or two people calling themselves police officers, assaulted and battered me. It was a very scary situation because once it was, what was his name, Payne, once Thomas Payne grabbed my arm, it was like I knew that any movement that I make could be misconstrued as resistance, and he could use that as an excuse to throw me to the ground and crush me against the ground underneath his body weight, like I've seen other police officers do to innocent people who are just doing things that they have every right to do. Or so I'm concerned that two officers did this, and when they were told what they were doing, they didn't stop, first of all. And I'm also concerned that Brian Bishop, the second person to commit assault and battery against me, didn't even know why I was being detained. He just followed, whatever word that he wanted to follow, that his friends told him. He wasn't concerned about the fact that there was none of what they call probable cause or reasonable suspicion. There was no reason to stop us. So I'm very concerned that they did that because it shows malicious intent to me. And what I want to see is a criminal prosecution, because they did not have the authority. Therefore, they do not have immunity. So that's what I would like to see, because that's the only way that these police officers are going to begin to learn that they can't just go out and violate the rights of innocent people, or the so-called rights.
I say so-called rights here because I'm not sure that rights even actually exist. That might be a topic for another conversation. But I also wanted to point out that this isn't about, this is mainly about principle, where police officers feel like they can put somebody in a situation where that person fears for their life. Okay? And it doesn't matter if there are any marks left on your body. It doesn't matter if, you were, just because a police officer didn't, punch you in the face or bruise you or create any lacerations or anything on you like that. The psychological effect of being controlled by a man with a gun is a very scary thing, and that is not a position that innocent people should be put in. People should not fear for their life and for their safety just because a police officer wants to, get the better of them somehow.
Okay. For record-keeping purposes, and you don't need to answer this if you feel uncomfortable, but when we receive a complaint, I'm supposed to list the age, race, phone number, mailing address, those things on the complaint form. Again, that's up to you if you don't want to provide that.
So here he's asking for completely irrelevant information. And this is kind of the way that we are viewed by government, where they just want to know, race, ethnicity. They want to know all of these things so that they can categorize you and create statistical analysis for sociological purposes of sociological control, basically. What types of people complain against police. And why do they want to know this?
Yeah, I don't mind the contact information. I don't mind the, putting my name, Robbie. You can, I don't see, unless there's like a good relevant reason why to put my age or even my ethnicity. I'm not sure why any of that's relevant, so I don't see why it would need to be on a complaint.
Yeah, I figured that would be your position, and that's fine. Yeah, I think it's primarily something that's used by the state for statistical analysis. No problem. Now, going back to your concerns, I too am glad that you didn't resist the officers, and the officers, from my perspective, from watching the videos, that they were directing you and the others. Yes, they did place hands on you to try to direct you to different places, you and your friends.
So right here, he's sort of minimizing the actions of the officer by saying that the officer directed me. But I mean, you could say the same thing about a rapist. Oh yeah, he was just directing that girl into an alley. The rapist was just directing her there, and he just put his hands on her in order to direct her into that alleyway. That's all he was doing.
And the allegation that they battered you, I don't think they physically battered you as far as striking you or anything like that. I didn't see that. Just to confirm, you didn't get struck.
And see here, he's again trying to minimize what happened by saying, well, you didn't get struck, right? And he's totally forgetting about what I said about, feeling like I'm in danger. Yeah.
I don't believe I was struck in the sense of a person like throwing a punch or anything, but I would rather have been struck than had a person with a gun at their waist take me by the arm and try to direct me to the ground.
Right.
And then
no,
Bishop also, I think he like tried to knock the camera out of my hand or something. So yeah, I believe the battery. I don't understand the legal system that you guys use. I know what a crime is. I know what a trespass is. I know when a person is committing violence against me. So I don't know what legal words that you use, because to me it just sounds like legalese is a foreign language. So all I know is that the moment that an officer touched me, before even, trying to attempt a reasonable conversation with me, as soon as he touched me, I feared for my life. I didn't know how I could move. I didn't know whether or not, if I walked toward the curb, is he just going to shove me harder? Because it seemed like he was kind of trying to, pull me, like he had my arm and was kind of trying to, get me to go that way. And then Bishop later did that on an even more extreme level. But as far as the injury is, fear for my life. And, so if I wasn't struck or bruised or had to go to the hospital or anything, I don't consider that was a non-battery. It's battery. I believe you consider it battery the moment they lay hands on a person. Is that?
See, and this is where we get into the difference between what is legal battery and what is battery or what is assault and battery. Because if you're put in a position where you fear for your safety by somebody and you feel like they're acting with malicious intent, then I really don't care what your legal system says. All I care is about the fact that, hey, you're committing violence against me, and I know that's a crime. So, whatever you want to call it, I'm calling it a wrong, and I want to see you have consequences for just doing this against innocent people.
Well, it, and in some cases it may be construed that way. So you are free to pursue whatever avenues you would like. For example, let's say you feel like you were battered and you wanted criminal prosecution, and then I would direct you to the district attorney's office if you're interested in that. As far as my job is to ensure that we speak to the officers, find out, what was their perspective, what actions did they take, and why did they take them. Now, the concerns that you raised, I have those same concerns. I have concerns as to why did they decide to detain you? Why did they decide to put hands on you? So trust me, I have those same concerns, and those are the same questions that I'm going to be asking.
Great. Another concern I have is when I went in to file the complaint, the guy, what was his name? Let me grab his card. Mike Adair was working.
Yes.
ADAIR. And he kind of tried to play around with me. He tried to mess with me a little bit by, he took the complaint, and then when I started asking him questions that made him uncomfortable, first he wanted me to go back to his office, okay, which, maybe to you that doesn't seem like a scary thing, maybe because you go in there often or that's your workplace or whatever, but when I just got attacked by two of the people that I have a feeling are probably somewhere back there, and now he wants me to come into his office alone and without the ability to record, it's kind of disconcerting. So my only choice was to ask him questions in the lobby, and I even offered him the opportunity to, we could go outside and talk privately if he wanted to, because it seemed like he had more questions to ask me if I wanted to file criminal charges. But so at first, he said the complaint that you filed is for the internal affairs. And I said, so that's separate from the criminal, and he said yes. So then when I started asking him difficult questions, he said, if you want to go back, to discuss possible criminal charges, then you would have to come back here. When I said, well, we'll just have to talk out here then, because I'm not willing to, risk my safety to go back there. And once he started to receive difficult questions that I was asking, questions that he didn't seem to want to answer, he tried to say that I was refusing to answer his questions, and he tried to use that as an excuse to go to his back office and just leave me be. And when I asked him, well, what about the criminal charges? I still want to file these. I want to make sure that they are criminally prosecuted. And he said, well, you've already filed the complaint. And then he tried to pretend that complaint was also for the criminal charges, when before he had said that it was not. So he lied to me and tried to manipulate me. And he also, I feel like he was protecting the officers that just committed a crime. And he also sorry. He also, I asked him the names of the officers that were present because they are all complicit because they stood by and did nothing. It's not like they stopped, their fellow officers from making a mistake. They just stood and tried to intimidate me and make me feel as though I was outnumbered and that they could just do whatever they wanted at any time. So I wanted the names of all of the officers, and he gave me 6 names, and I believe that there were 7 or 8 officers present. So one of the names that he gave me, where he did not give me, was Vasquez, who spoke to me on the video. And I also noticed that I believe Vasquez is the one coming up as police chief at Oxnard PD. And so my concern is that he didn't give me this person's name because he's trying to protect the person who is going to be police chief, which only has made me open up now an investigation into Oxnard Police Department to determine whether or not they have a history of corruption, or if they're all just sticking together, or if none of them are on the up and up, so to speak.
Okay, Robbie, I can address that. There were about, let me actually pull up this the notes that I have here. Okay, so there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There were about 7 there, police personnel there on scene. Now, I'm looking at the incident report printout that lists 6 people. So what I'm guessing is that Commander Adair looked on that call history that he had on the screen in the watch commander's office, and it initially showed 6 people, not including Vasquez, who was in fact there, as you say. So when I watched the video, I noted all the officers there, and I noticed that Vasquez was there. And so I think the information that the commander had at the time was based on who the dispatchers thought were dispatched and responded to this scene. But others, including Vasquez, showed up. Vasquez is a motor officer on a motorcycle. So he probably heard the call, decided to show up, may not have checked out on the radio. So those are probably discrepancies that inadvertently led to him not giving you all the correct names because he didn't know. And Vasquez does not have anything to do with chief of police. Our chief of police is Whitney, and Vasquez is a sergeant. He doesn't have anything to do with chief or assistant chief or anything else. But I'll give you the names of the personnel that were there, and you can compare them with what you have. Bishop Payne, which you are aware of, and Payne is spelled P-A-Y-N. Another officer who was there but didn't interact with you guys, from what I could tell, was Aguilar, A-G-U-I-L-A-R. And then Sergeant Vasquez, that's with 2 Z's, V-A-Z-Q-U-E-Z. And then Sergeant Klug, who was the one who ultimately talked with you at the end there. There's also a Detective Charles Butel, who you probably saw at the beginning. He was in plain clothes.
Yeah,
and then there was a...
What was his name?
Butel, Charles Butel, B-U-T-T-E-L-L.
Okay, yeah, I have him.
Yeah. And then there was what we call a PSO, a public safety officer, not sworn, and he was standing by. He may have been with one of the officers riding in the car with them, but he didn't appear to have any involvement. So hopefully that clarifies that initial discrepancy that you just explained to me.
Okay.
As far as Commander Adair being unwilling to speak with you in the lobby, it seems to me that he should have maybe inquired a little bit more about why you were unwilling to go into the office. Did he ask you why you didn't want to?
I explained to him why, and
Okay.
he didn't seem to care. I actually have, I explained to him why, and I don't know why he didn't find some other way to do it or why he didn't take it seriously. But it's like as soon as I asked a question like I think I asked, are you training your officers to just arbitrarily assault people? I think that he felt uncomfortable and didn't want to have a conversation anymore.
Yeah, that's kind of a charged question, but he should have been able to answer it. Did you, happen to videotape that encounter with him?
So the thing about this being, a so-called charged question, I noticed that I've noticed many discussions that I've had with people involving themselves, like government, police officers, whatever position they're in. If I ask questions, it's like, yes, there are some so-called charged questions, but like a question like, are you training your officers to do this? Yes, it may be like charged, but you should be able to answer it. You should be able to say yes or no, or give some kind of an answer. Like if you care at all about accountability, if you care at all about the person that you're talking to, about good faith communication, then it doesn't matter if a question is charged or not. It doesn't matter if a question is even inappropriate. You should be able to point out, oh, well, this question isn't the appropriate type of question to ask because of this and this and this, rather than making somebody feel bad for asking the question or ignoring it, pretending they didn't ask it, and just moving on. Like, people who are in these positions should consider the people that they are talking to as fellow humans, and thereby give them respect. Of course, I'm going to be upset, and I'm going to ask charged questions, but people should be prepared for that. So I think that even just pointing out that it was a charged question is a little silly, but at least this John Keller kind of points out that he should have been able to handle that question at least. But yeah,
I did. Yeah, I have.
Would you provide that to me?
I will. I will likely send them to you. I have to speak to somebody about that first, because again, I am a little concerned about the level of corruption in this office. So I have to consider that everyone is suspicious at this point, given the way that I've been treated.
So here I'm just pointing out the fact that even though you're internal affairs, that doesn't put you above the possibility of corruption. People often think, well, I'm talking to internal affairs now, so they're going to be interested in stopping corruption because they want to believe the PR. But I believe there are many examples of internal affairs agencies not doing anything, not acting on evidence, hiding evidence against officers, just being completely ineffective. So still, even though I'm talking to internal affairs, I'm still concerned about how my words can be used against me, and because this is still kind of like, in my eyes, this is the adversary.
I don't share those same concerns, but I could see where you might be a little uncomfortable.
And see, he says, I don't share those same concerns, but I can see how you might be uncomfortable. So he's just trying to kind of downplay my words by saying he doesn't share the same concerns, because obviously he wouldn't, because he is internal affairs. So
I also wanted to let you know that we have instructed our officers to allow people to videotape in public and not to interfere. And so it's not as if we allow officers to intervene in the manner that occurred with you. It may be that some officers were, how would we say, not as cognizant of First Amendment rights, and some of the memos that go out, and it's a little alarming to me in this day and age that officers wouldn't be more savvy to this, but it happens. Officers sometimes, there's a lot of rules and regulations and bulletins, and sometimes they're just not paying enough attention. So they definitely have been reminded what not to do, and these specific officers that were involved in this are going to be directly counseled minimally.
Counseled minimally. Let's go back a few seconds and just listen to him say how they will be counseled minimally.
They definitely have been reminded what not to do, and these specific officers that were involved in this are going to be directly counseled minimally about this incident and how to do better next time.
So he's already laying the foundation for just a slap on the wrist. Like, these officers are not going to receive any real disciplinary action. They're just basically going to be counseled minimally, even though they basically committed terror against 3 innocent individuals. And it's not really a situation where, it's not like they just were working in an office and screwed up on how to fill out a form and it caused like a little problem. This is a situation where people wearing badges and carrying guns were outside and terrorized 3 individuals, and it's just because maybe they weren't paying attention during one of the training days, regarding recording, or maybe they just weren't as cognizant of the training, and so they'll be counseled minimally. This is why police officers think they can get away with this, because they have been getting away with it, because all they ever get are minimal marks that don't actually mean anything.
Hopefully not minimally. I mean, they, I hope that it will go beyond just mere counseling and, oh, this is how you treat people with cameras, because these officers were acting with malicious intent. And it's not something that should be so easily brushed aside, because I've studied the psychology of people who are placed in situations where they have perceived authority, such as police officers. And I understand, the Stanford prison experiments. I understand the Milgram experiments. I understand many other experiments that have been done to test the psychology of these people. And the trouble is that when someone is misinformed, as you say, or just haven't been cognizant of their training, you're putting lives in jeopardy, and you're putting safety in jeopardy. You're not only wasting resources that the public is forced to pay for, but you are also frightening people. Like, if I hadn't have had a head on my shoulders, if I'd have been just anyone else, then I might have accidentally twitched or made some movement which would have ended up resulting in me being shot dead, like so many other people have for just making the wrong move at the wrong time, because again, it's another human with a gun and body armor who is inflicting their authority upon, an unarmed person for the most part, and untrained, and those officers are responding as though these innocent people have full knowledge of what's going to happen to them. And when officers are refusing to answer questions, I attempted to, detain the officers that were all involved, and they just walked away as though nothing had happened. Once, I believe it was Sergeant Holland. Was he the older gentleman that came and spoke to me at the very end?
Sergeant Klug.
That was Klug. Okay, I noticed he picked something up off the ground and then came over and walked up to me. Once he dismissed them, then they all just left. And he refused to answer my questions when I was in the middle of an investigation, and he was actually being detained, because with all of them around, now I have reasonable suspicion that they either have committed a crime or are about to, because they're complicit. They were witnesses. And I have 2 officers who actually did commit crimes who, quite frankly, should have been arrested, right? Like, I mean, if I had done what they did to me, if I had done that to somebody else in front of them, I would have likely been arrested. So I don't see why there is a double standard there. And
I'll also point out that if I had done, if I just walked up to a police officer and grabbed them by the arm, I would probably be dead. Or at worst, beat up and then arrested for assault. So I've noticed that some people have tried to say, well, you weren't assaulted, blah, blah, blah. Yet, if we turn it around and I grab the arm of a police officer, what are they going to call it? I'll bet you it's assault. Yeah. And notice how I'm bringing up my investigation. So, I've just been a victim of a crime. So, and also there are other officers who are reasonably suspected of being complicit with the crime. So why can't I detain them in order to further my investigation? Why the double standard? I want people to start really thinking about this, because if police need reasonable suspicion that you either have or are about to commit a crime, and then they can detain you based on that, then why can't I detain someone based on that? Is it risky? Yes. Could I be putting my life in jeopardy by detaining the wrong person at the wrong time? Yes. But the question remains, do I have the right to detain someone if I believe that they have or are about to commit a crime or are in the middle of committing a crime? Do I have the right to arrest someone, no matter who they are, if I have probable cause, a cause of action? These are things that we need to, I believe that we as society need to begin to consider moving forward, because I don't believe that those who are policing us are interested in justice. I believe that we are going to have to find justice ourselves and not continue to rely upon police officers.
I'm just concerned because I want there to be more accountability. I want officers to understand that just because they have a badge, it doesn't give them additional rights to violate innocent people, especially when they have no authority over them, or no evidence of authority over them. So that's my concern.
Yep, so I want to point out this no evidence of authority. The word that they commonly use for this is jurisdiction. And I've been simply asking, is there any factual evidence anywhere that shows that these police officers have the authority to force us to do things just because they say so? What factual evidence exists that police can do this? Is there any? So far, I have seen none.
And I share those same concerns. And I think the two sergeants that were there could have taken some assertive steps to remedy this a little quicker.
So notice how he said he shares the same concerns. He didn't say, oh, you're crazy for wanting to detain someone, or you're crazy because you're launching an investigation. He says, I share those same concerns. So this just shows me that what I am wanting people to hear is not unreasonable. This is something which we have the right to do. We have the right to detain and investigate. Just like police officers have the right, we have the right. Not all of us may have the training. If we do it and we don't have training for certain situations, we may end up getting in lots of trouble, but that's what we bring upon ourselves for putting ourselves in that type of position. But as far as, people saying, oh, you can't do that because you're not a police officer, I disagree. If I don't see why I do not have the right to detain someone who I believe is committing a crime. It's that simple.
It was nice that Sergeant Kluge apologized and then ended the detention. And as I calculated the time, it was about 7 minutes and 40 seconds or so that the detention took place. Does that sound about right to you?
Well,
So this question is, this is an interesting question that he asks, because he says, from what I can tell. So he's right away saying this is his opinion, right? And he's saying the detention lasted, 7 minutes and so many seconds. From what I can tell, it looks like the detention lasted this long. So, and then he asks me, does that sound right to you? Now, when he asks me this question, the way he intends me to hear it is just, was that about how long this thing took place? But what a lot of people don't realize is, when you're asked this type of question and you think that that is all they are asking, is this the amount of time that this took place, then you are not listening very carefully to the question that is being asked of you. Because if you assume that that is the only question that is being asked, does this seem like this is how long it was, then you're forgetting about the fact that if you say yes, then you're also saying, yep, I believe I was detained as well. So he's trying to get me, by asking me a question about the amount of time, he's trying to get me to basically testify, because remember, your words may always be used against you. They can and will be used against you. And if it came right down to it, he would play this call in a courtroom and say, well, if he didn't think that he was detained, then why did he answer yes to, he said he was detained for 7 minutes and 47 seconds or whatever it was. Because I said yes, all because I thought, oh, he's just asking me about how long it took. Well, no. You have to be careful because the questions that are asked, the wording is very important, and your words can and will be used against you in a court of law, they say. So be careful when talking to them is all I'm trying to tell you.
I wasn't even aware that there was actually a detention. I understand that Bishop said the words that I was being detained, but I knew that I hadn't done anything to warrant
Yeah,
a
that's
detention.
they pretty much detained you. It's pretty clear.
And he says even there, I pretty much he pretty much detained you. He doesn't want to say that he detained me because he wants this was an unlawful detention. Like, that's all he wants it to be. Why? The question is why? Because if it's I think because if it's an unlawful detention, right, then I am, as long as I say it is a detention, then I'm using the legalese, and I am allowing the authority of this police officer to exist. So I'm basically saying, yep, I agree that the police officer has the authority to detain people, but because that's legalese, they could construe that as me saying, yes, this is a police officer. Therefore, when I try to, for example, file a lawsuit against the police officer, or I try to file criminal charges against the police officer, they'll say, well, he's immune. You can file this against the agency or whatever, but he's immune from prosecution because he's a police officer, and this was all it was an unlawful detention, and we have a process for that. So I want to point out that no, I'm not calling this an unlawful detention. I am calling this assault and battery. I don't care what clothing the person was wearing. I don't care what kind of badge they had. I don't care about anything except this was another human who committed assault and battery against me, and I want them criminally prosecuted. That gives me jurisdiction over them. I'm the victim. Therefore, I have the ability, I have the cause of action to prosecute them.
So, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, relatively short, but like you say, shouldn't have happened in the first place. So, I wouldn't portray it that that it was completely without some redeeming quality. The sergeant did apologize and end the contact. Sure, we could have done better in a lot of areas. I think from the initial contact to your filing of the complaint, we've done some things better.
Yeah, and I even told Mike Adair that, if Bishop and Payne just come out and either apologize to me or explain what happened or why they did what they did, then I probably wouldn't be trying to have them criminally charged. But the fact that they expressed no remorse, that I wasn't extended any courtesy whatsoever, it just shows me the mindset of the people at Oxnard PD.
So let me get this right. Let me get this straight. So you asked Commander Adair if the officers could come out and apologize?
Yeah.
And he didn't do anything about that?
So I think here John is a little surprised at this, because I think this is the first time he's heard about this. I think that he had heard about everything else so far, but hadn't heard about this particular tidbit of information. And it's like, is it so unreasonable that a person just goes in and asks for an apology? Like, we know the police officers did something wrong. So, can you just make this all simple? Have them come and apologize so that, then I won't be looking to file criminal charges, because I'll understand that they swallowed their pride and they apologized. And that's all I wanted. That's all I wanted in that moment. Pretty powerful when you think about it, because when this is brought up to somebody after an incident like this, why don't they just say, have their officer come out and apologize? Like, it should be that simple. But no, they don't want to afford you any respect. They don't want to treat you like a human. They want to lie to you, and they want to manipulate you. That is their purpose. That is their goal.
He didn't. I told him right out, I either want to I want to prosecute them criminally, or, if you just have them come out and explain why they did it and apologize, then I'll probably just drop this and go away. And he did nothing about that.
Okay, I'd be interested in listening to that or viewing that recording.
Yeah, I'll have to look, because I know on one of he came out, I think, 3 times, and I got the first 2, and then I think one of the times I didn't get a recording, and I'm not quite sure if there is a recording of the last time, so I'm having to go back through and look. But I've been busy with other things. But yeah, it's just the vibe that you get from these people. They don't treat you like you're human. They just, and I get that you say that Klug apologized, but he had nothing to really. If he were truly remorseful, if he truly meant the apology, then he wouldn't have walked away while I was attempting to get resolution. He wouldn't have had his officers walk away while all I was trying to do was get resolution. I believe that, if I had, whipped out some fancy FBI badge and told them that they can't leave, I imagine that then they would have stayed. But because they just view me as, nothing else except, the cattle that they try to keep in line, I think that's why they give off this vibe and completely disrespect me. So, and that's really unacceptable, considering that the supposed purpose of government is to protect the liberty of everyone. It's kind of a scary thing when they don't.
As you're aware, I'm sure, you have people in every walk of life, every profession, that you have some that handle things exemplary, they handle encounters, they handle people exemplary, and then you have others that don't. You have some people that are in certain professions, let's say police.
So, before he keeps going on, I just want to point out that he interrupted me here, because I think I was making a good point, and he didn't want me to continue on by pointing out that, as a whole, police officers, and we can take it into the arena of judges and even lawyers, are acting contrary to what the stated purpose of government is. If government is supposed to exist in order to protect everyone's liberty, Obviously, the word government itself, to govern, to rule over, completely is opposite of that idea of protecting a person's liberty, because you can't protect somebody's liberty and rule over them. But the stated purpose of government is to do just that, and that's not what is happening. What is happening is opposite of the stated purpose.
Doctor, lawyer, in it for the right reasons, and there are some that maybe have the wrong attitudes. They bring the wrong attitudes to the game. So, I mean, I don't want you to believe that, you know, every Oxnard officer is in a certain category, because that's not the case. But your encounter didn't go well, and that may have been your only encounter with Oxnard police officers. I don't know.
So here he's kind of doing the whole bad apple thing. So yeah, you encountered a couple of bad apples, but it's not how everyone is. And you know, my response to that is, if there are good apples in a police department, then why are they seeing all of the bad things that the bad apples do, and they're not doing anything at all about it? I believe that there may be some good people who work as police officers, but I think that they simply are not aware that they are criminals. They are engaging in criminal activity, legalized criminal activity, but criminal activity nonetheless, because whether something is legalized or not is entirely irrelevant. If you are committing a crime against somebody, if you are aggressing against somebody, then I don't care if you've also happened to work for people who said that you were allowed to do that, because I was just doing my job was not an effective defense at Nuremberg, and it's not an effective defense today.
Yeah, it was, and there were 7 of them, so there were 7 or 8 of them total, I guess.
Yeah. I understand that you could have another encounter with Oxnard police officers that goes completely different. So I just encourage you not to have a picture of the Oxnard Police Department that is, you know, slanted due to this one encounter that didn't go as well as it should have.
Mm-hmm. The PR is very important to him, because it's important to people who work as government to appear as though they are there to help everyone and that they are good, and that occasionally these bad things happen, but it's just a couple bad apples, it's just a bad situation. You know, maybe next time you see the Oxnard police, they'll be smiling and waving. But the question is, are they smiling and waving and acting nice just because they know that they're on camera? How do they treat people when they don't know that we are watching? That's the question. And that's what I'm trying to point out. There were 7 police officers at this encounter, and not a single one of them acted as a good apple, and 2 of them were sergeants. Keep that in mind.
So, what do you believe are the chances that these 2 people will be held criminally responsible?
Well, I think I can say with certainty that they will be held administratively accountable.
So he didn't answer the question. He just wanted to say they'll be held administratively responsible, and we've already heard that that will be done through the use of minimal counseling. So right now, they're not proactively doing anything to make sure that these officers are actually held accountable with any consequences that will actually affect them in a negative sense, other than a minor mark on their record that, who knows, we may not even be able to see. We may not even be able to look up the records of these police officers and see, oh yeah, on this day they committed assault and battery against somebody. No, it'll likely just be, mark received for minimal counseling, and nobody will know why or what happened or the mindset of the officers. They just won't have that information because nobody ever did anything about it, right? Nobody ever held them accountable in any meaningful sense.
Okay, will I be made aware of the manner in which they are held administratively accountable?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Will I be made aware of the manner in which they are administratively held accountable?
I will send you a disposition letter. If I don't have your address, I can send it by email, which is fine. I just send an attachment. And I can also call you to tell you that the complaint was in whatever category. By law, state of California, I inform dispositions on the following categories: sustained, exonerated, not sustained, unfounded, or pending. In this case, I suspect it will likely be a finding of sustained, and beyond that, I won't be able to tell you what discipline, if any, was handed out. I would just say that we looked into the matter and this was the finding. And sustained means that whatever the allegation was, that it was found to be true, that the conduct of the officers was as described by the complainant. In fact, here's the sustained definition: when the investigation discloses sufficient evidence to establish that the act occurred and that it constituted misconduct. So that's likely what would happen in this case. Now, the possible outcomes for the individuals involved could be, if we start at the low end, would be counseling, and most counseling is also documented. So it would be the documented counseling that would follow that person for a period of time, and beyond that, it would be, and the next level up is like a letter of reprimand. That's a more severe type of write-up that stays in the person's personnel file for the. After that, you could be suspension, days off. It could be, removal from certain positions. There could be demotions, all the way up to getting fired. These are all ramifications of discipline. And we use, like most agencies, progressive discipline, meaning, if somebody's had prior instances, let's say some of these officers had prior instances of detentions that didn't go well. So might ramp up discipline.
So the thing to notice about this is this is basically a message to police officers saying, if you have no history of doing anything wrong, then you're perfectly okay to go out and violate people's rights. You are perfectly okay to go out and commit crimes against innocent people because you don't have a record. You don't have an administrative record. So don't worry, all you'll get is a little warning, and that's it. Like, you'll first get a warning letter, and then if you do it again, you'll get counseling. But yeah, that just means you can do it a few times, and as long as you if you don't get caught, then you got away with it. But if you get caught, then yeah, we'll slap you on the wrist a little bit, and then don't get caught again, and then really don't get caught again, because if you get caught like 6 or 7 times, then you're fired. Like, is this really the message that we want to send to people who carry guns and are supposed to protect the liberties of the people that they claim that they are there to protect? Do we really want to be sending them the message that, yeah, you can do a few bad things and not get any punishment at all. Because you're new. Just like if you make a mistake at work, you didn't fill out that form properly, so you'll get a warning. It's not a good message to be sending police officers, in my opinion.
And progressively based on those factors. So that's kind of a view of how discipline is handled. But unfortunately, I can't. And at the conclusion, I can't tell you this is the discipline that was needed for their officer or officers.
So now, in your opinion, do you believe that they will be criminally charged, or do you believe that the district attorney will just not do anything because of the fact that they're police officers?
Well, let's put the police officers aside for a moment. Let's just look at what does an entity like the district attorney's office pursue in battery cases involving anybody. And I can tell you from experience that they typically file cases that they have a very good chance of being successful in prosecuting, so that their success rate, can be advertised as, hey, we have a 95% success rate, etc.
Now, okay, so a couple things. First, he sets aside the fact that they're police officers, okay, and he speaks only in relations to battery cases. So he's already setting it up to try to minimize what happened, to minimize the effect, to forget about the fact that this person had a gun and grabbed you by the arm and showed criminal intent or malicious intent when they did so. And let's just look at battery cases. And by the way, let's keep in mind that prosecutors want a 95% conviction rate. Okay. I get that as a prosecutor, your ability might be measured by your conviction rate. However, if you are a so-called government prosecutor, then and you're getting a 95% conviction rate, then I would be interested in looking at how that number is derived. If somebody enters an uninformed guilty plea, is that an affirmative for the conviction rate? Does that increase the number of convictions? Does that count as a conviction if a person takes a plea deal? Because a lot of people are being intimidated into taking plea deals. And so it's, I don't know, it's also kind of like, if your job is really to protect everyone and you have a 95% conviction rate as a prosecutor, then it seems to me as though you are not prosecuting enough, because surely you should be able to fail more often. Because if somebody is accused of committing a crime and you are waiting to make sure that you will succeed before you try to prosecute them, then you're leaving it all up to your opinion as to whether or not you'll have a successful prosecution. You're ignoring the fact that, they're supposed to be tried by a jury, so it would be the jury's decision, guilty, not guilty. And so now there's a problem where you are actually letting people get away with crimes because you only want to try to convict people that you are sure 95% of the time that you will be able to convict them. So does that mean that if there's not enough evidence, you're not even going to try? You're not going to search more? You're not going to allow there to be the possibility of justice in a situation just because you, personally, you, the human who is the prosecutor, have the opinion that you may lose? I mean, these are interesting things to think about, I think.
Coupled with the fact that, as you can imagine, the courtrooms and the attorneys are inundated with thousands and thousands of cases.
Okay, so the thousands and thousands of cases. So I know it sounds like I just recommended more prosecution, so that would increase the caseload, but actually, if people were doing it right, then it would not increase the caseload at all. And the fact that he mentioned that there are thousands and thousands of prosecutions and a 95% conviction rate means that 95% of thousands and thousands of people are being coerced into taking plea deals because they are made to fear what the consequences will be if their case goes in front of a jury. Also, the thousands and thousands of people that are being accused of crimes, are they actually being accused of real crimes, or are they being accused of policy violations? Are they being accused of violating a policy that they never agreed to in the first place, where no evidence of jurisdiction has been submitted by the prosecution? And these people, when there is no evidence of jurisdiction submitted by the prosecution, shouldn't that be a dismissed case? And shouldn't the prosecutors and judges not be trying to get the person to take the plea deal in order to keep their conviction rate up? Because if there's no evidence of jurisdiction, then it should be a simple slam dunk dismissal. So, in an ethical world, if people were being charged with actual crimes, there might only be, tens and tens of people being prosecuted, or maybe even hundreds and hundreds. And your conviction rate might be lower, but the court would not be inundated with thousands and thousands of people, because it would not be a part of a money-making scam, a money-making hustle.
They have to, have a gatekeeper as to what cases they accept. So typically misdemeanor battery cases, with anybody involved, let's just take a regular person on the street, and if there's not a... What's that?
Sorry to interrupt, but is it just battery, or it's assault and battery, right? And I believe
assault. Assault is 240.
Go ahead.
Assault is 240 of the penal code, and typically that's when someone attempts to strike and misses, right?
Yep. So assault is blah 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 the penal code, and it's typically when a person attempts to strike and misses. Yeah, typically, maybe that's what it may be. But how about when you are afraid to move for fear that if you move, then you will be murdered by the person who is making you afraid to move? Is that assault? Or if it's not assault, then is there some other magical legalese term that can be used to describe what that is? Because I know logically that is intimidation. That's a crime. It's making you fear for your safety and holding on to you. It's an imprisonment of sorts, right? Like, you can't move. And notice he says, it's typically when, because once he says it's typically when blah blah blah, that's irrelevant information. He's only trying to prevent me from wanting to go to the district attorney's office. He's trying to dissuade me from filing criminal charges. He's trying to protect the officers. If he had no interest, if he had no dog in the fight, then he wouldn't be trying to make it seem as though I will fail before I even start.
Somebody tries to punch you, but this is battery. 242 of the penal code would be if somebody makes contact, they hit you, they grab or throw down or those kind of things. So in this case, if you were to go to the district attorney's office, they would probably say, okay, this would be classified as a 242 battery if you felt that you were battered by being grabbed. So typically those cases, my experience has been that district attorney's office doesn't file those often if there's no injury, especially if the injury isn't significant, just because they have so many cases and they can only take so many cases to trial.
So now he's trying to say there was no injury. I mean, he's basically making his own determination that there was no injury. Just because I wasn't struck or cut or bruised, he's trying to say there was no injury. What about the fact that for 8 minutes, that's 8 minutes that can never be returned. That's 8 minutes where I feared for my life, where I thought my whole week now might be spent with me recovering in a jail cell because police officers tried to hurt me and beat me, and they threw me on the ground and then arrested me, claiming that I was resisting or something. For 8 minutes, I was terrorized. That in itself is an injury. And the fact that I am kind of like aware of the fact that officers will terrorize people and just that I've kind of gotten sort of used to that idea doesn't mean that was not an injury, because it definitely was. I mean, you take somebody who maybe isn't used to being treated that way, or maybe wasn't prepared to be treated that way, and they might have post-traumatic stress disorder. They might have to see a psychologist. They might have to see a therapist just to feel safe again, just to be able to sleep. Why? Just because I have a higher mental constitution, or just because I've been exposed to more violence? Are you going to assume that I was not injured just because I was capable of filing a report and was willing to walk into the police department and face the bully? Why do you assume that I was not injured? Because it is still an injury. It is still a crime.
So, with that being said, if you want to add the equation of police officers involved, you may think, oh, they're really not going to do it because the police officers are involved. Well, I'm not going to take a position on that. I don't think that would be the case, but the district attorney's office is.
I'm not going to take a position on that, but I don't think it'll be the case. So he just said that he wasn't going to take a position on that, and then he took a position on that.
Separate entity from us, and they're by design they're that way. For example, if there's an officer-involved shooting, they do a criminal investigation of that, separate from our administrative investigation. So in this case, it would be the same thing. If you claim that you were battered, you went to the district attorney's office, it would be their choice whether they pursued that investigation or not. So it would not be something that we would investigate. Probably be a conflict of interest there, I would imagine. So.
Well, it also constitutes a false imprisonment, doesn't it? Because, I mean, they basically put me in a position where I couldn't leave under threat of violence. So, and all of these people had weapons, and they showed malicious intent by taking my arm and trying to control me. by taking my own.
Well, that situation's never been construed to be a false imprisonment. I've never seen that. I'm going on 30 years in this profession. That is typically used if, for example, a person is held against their will in a enclosure, a building, a structure, and they're not allowed.
So he's saying false imprisonment is typically, well, first he's using a logical fallacy. He's saying, I've never seen that happen before, so that's not what it is. Well, just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean that that is not logically what it is. If police officers create a perimeter that you cannot leave in, an enclosure, that itself becomes a psychological enclosure that you are not allowed to cross this imaginary line that the police officer has directed you to not cross. Because if you do cross it, you'll get attacked. They'll jump on you, they'll tase you, they'll shoot you, whatever. So, to say that just because it was outdoors, it doesn't constitute false imprisonment, is kind of silly, because it is an imprisonment. It is a prevention of being able to leave an area that the police officer has determined. So I don't care if it's in a building. And speaking of buildings where you might be forced to be in a room or in a building under threat of violence, think about the courtroom for a moment. Think about all those times where they say, if you don't come to court, we'll issue a warrant for your arrest, which means that men with guns, or men and women with guns, will come and throw you in a cage. And, oh, by the way, the prosecution has not submitted evidence of jurisdiction to show that this court has the authority over you to do this. It sounds like false imprisonment to me, going on a daily basis in however many thousands of courtrooms there are in America.
For some lengthy period of time, isolated from others. Oftentimes there's weapons, pointed, or they're locked up. It's all that kind of thing. So I don't think that seems like quite a stretch. But in any event, trying to think of where we were with our conversation.
Well, one moment, if we could just kind of go back. If we eliminate the element that these people are police officers, and let me ask you this: if you're on the sidewalk and 7 or 8 people come along and they all have guns, or most of them have guns, and then 2 of them grab you and basically tell you can't leave, and they try to get you, on the ground to do whatever, right? And these are just normal people. What is the name of the crime that they have committed? What would you be calling the police and saying that these people did?
They would be free to file a battery charge. Yeah. Now, in this case, police are commonly directing people, asking them to have a seat over here, move over there, and if you were to think about it in this fashion, okay, the officers are thinking, this is suspicious. This could be some sort of surveillance of the police station for an attack. Who knows what is in the mind of the officers with all the violence taking place on the streets against them.
Yeah. So all of the violence taking place on the streets against police officers. Has it ever occurred to anybody that the violence that is taking place against police officers on the street may be because police officers are committing violence against innocent people, and then they're not being held accountable for it? And so the only recourse that anybody has is to commit violence against them on the street. Has that thought occurred to anyone? Like, maybe it'll actually save the lives of more police officers if we begin to prosecute them for the criminal actions that they commit.
So now they begin to direct people to the curb, as in this case, because they're trying to, how would you say, render the situation safe. Oftentimes, officers will do a pat-down, make sure no one has weapons. And then once they've patted people down, they have them sitting down, then they feel more.
Of course, all of this stuff that he's talking about is assuming that there is reasonable suspicion to do any of this in the first place. And keep in mind that officer safety is the reason, right? You just came across 3 unarmed, peaceful people who the worst thing that they had were phones. And you're concerned about officer safety when you have a gun and body armor and there's 7 of you?
Comfortable that they're not going to be attacked, that nobody has a weapon, and they can kind of find out, okay, what's going on? What do we have here? Who are these people? What is their purpose? Notice that I didn't ask you yet at all what your purpose was that day. I have an idea what your purpose may have been, but really that's not the point. If you want to hang out behind the police station, you can do so.
So here he is trying to kind of get me to talk about why I was doing it or what my purpose was that day, and he's even attempting to introduce his own assumptions about what I was doing, in the hopes that I will agree to something that he says, so that at some point my words can be used against me in the court of law.
But my point is that the officers were probably concerned about safety. They wanted compliance. They used a typical technique of just guiding people towards where they want them to go. And from your perspective, I'm being grabbed unnecessarily, and it feels very uncomfortable. That's understandable. If it were a lawful detention, the officers would be in the rights to do that. So what I'm saying is, I don't think there's any malicious intent to batter you. I think the officers just, followed the wrong procedure in deciding to detain you. And while they did that, they put hands on you because that's what they do. That's what police officers do. They move people to where they feel like it's safer for them. And if you're, seated on the curb with your legs crossed, then there's less chance that somebody's going to jump up, and attack the officer, because it takes more time to do that when you're seated with your legs crossed.
So here again, he's trying to frame it as a simple unlawful detention, because again, that makes it a legalese thing that they can administratively, punish for with a slap on the wrist, I might add, rather than the crime that it was, assault and battery. Because if he frames it as assault and battery, then that takes away the political label of police officer and makes that person able to be held accountable as a human. As long as you frame it as an unlawful detention, then the political fiction of police officer is kept, and then nothing serious will happen as a result of it, basically.
To let you know the mindset of the officers.
Yeah, and I mean, I can grasp that. That all presupposes that there is reasonable suspicion of a crime.
Right, and that's where they erred. Yeah. And as a result, I don't think it's a battery. I think it was a bad call to conduct a detention. But the rest of it, the officers, I don't think they did anything malicious, or I don't think they tried to hurt you or your friends. They They were just looking for compliance, and they were looking to reduce the danger factor for them.
So I don't care what a person's internal intentions are. If they are carrying a gun and they come up behind you and grab you by the arm and they have a gun at their waist, they may think, I'm doing this to save your soul, or they may think that there is some reason, a well-intentioned reason to do this. However, I don't care, because I'm the person who is having my arm grabbed by a person who has a gun. I am the person that this person is trying to, quote-unquote, direct to the ground by basically pulling them or shoving them in some way, using the inertia of the body to bring it to the ground. I am that person where that is being done. I don't care what your internal thoughts are, because as far as I know, you might be insane. You might be just somebody who does evil things thinking that you're doing good things. And so I don't really care what the perspective of the officers are. All I care is about the fact that a human holding a gun grabbed me by the arm, and that is a crime.
Well, I have a hard time believing that they could consider there to be a danger when just, three people are, all they're doing is having cameras, and these men are armed, and I have to point out that the level of violence that you say is occurring against police officers is very small in comparison to the number of people who are murdered by police, and many of them unjustifiably so. And it's interesting how I don't know, the Klug mentioned terrorism, in an effort to try to explain why this happened, and I have to say that I haven't seen any evidence of actual terrorism except by police officers and people who overextend and act beyond the scope of their supposed authority. And that's what makes this the most dangerous, is not the fact, if some random person just came up and grabbed my arm and they didn't have a gun and they didn't have the tendency to believe that they were greater than me and had the authority to, murder me if they wanted to and get away with it, then I wouldn't be very concerned if just a normal person grabbed my arm. But when a police officer does it who has, deadly weapons, and I realize that now I'm in a trap where I didn't even want to go the direction of the officer because I thought that he might just go faster, or he might make up some claim that I was resisting. So I couldn't even move. So maybe there is a better way that officers, if they are going to need to create a safe environment and make sure that people are compliant in situations where there actually is reasonable suspicion, then maybe they should alter their strategy, because this just gives them an excuse to lie and falsify reports and then cover up their crimes, and I've been seeing an awful lot of that lately, and it's very concerning. So that's
okay.
That's why it's so important to me. This is why it's so important to me that when they commit crimes like this, that they are criminally prosecuted, because that sends a message to all of the others. Oh, well, before, we just got a little bit of counseling or a letter, but now, if we do something against, the so-called law, if we do something that is a crime, then we can be criminally prosecuted. And I want officers to know that. I want people to know that they are not going to be held to a different standard just because they have a badge.
Okay, well, I disagree on the merit of it being a crime. I don't believe it is a level of a crime. I think it's a failure to follow protocol.
So he just said that he doesn't think it's a crime. So an armed person on the sidewalk walks up to you and grabs your arm and tries to force you onto the ground. I'm pretty sure that almost everyone will agree that that is a crime. Okay? If the only difference is it's not a crime when they have a badge, if it's not a crime when they have a badge and it's a crime when they don't have a badge, that is called a double standard. And that is something which is unacceptable. Because now, anybody who wants to control people or manipulate people, commit violence against people, what are they going to do? Oh, I want to be a police officer. This is the perfect job for me. Because I can commit crimes against people, but because I have a badge, it won't be a crime. Haha! That is what is wrong with this system. It's systematized corruption. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your political title is. To me, you are a person committing a crime. And to disagree that, oh, I don't think that's a crime at all. I disagree that that's a crime. Why is he disagreeing? And you'll notice, I'll try to pin him down and say, well, if somebody else did it, it would be a crime, right? And he'll want to end the call. If I remember right, he clearly seems to want to end the call when this discussion begins to go down.
And I think that the officers could have done a better job, but I don't think it's a crime. But you're free to pursue that if you choose.
Well, can I just ask, would it have been a crime if I did it?
If you did what? If you grabbed an officer?
Well, no, if I had a gun at my waist and I grabbed the arm of somebody and just walked up to them, grabbed their arm, and tried to direct them to sit down.
Well, technically, if you looked at the penal code, you could say all those cases may technically qualify, but
see, he's talking about the penal code, which is irrelevant because the code is just arbitrary codes that there is no evidence apply to anyone. The penal code that he is quoting now has nothing to do with whether or not something is a crime. He's conflating the penal code with my question about would it be a crime if I did this to somebody. He's trying to deflect from answering the question.
When you talk about practicality, what was the reasons that the officers did that? They weren't doing it to cause harm to you. They weren't doing it to be because they were looking for somebody to attack or.
So as long as I'm not going out looking for somebody to attack, and I'm not intending to cause harm, then I guess I have permission to, or I have the ability to, carry a gun at my waist and just grab people's arms and tell them to sit down. I can do that, and it's okay because I don't have the intent to harm them within myself. It doesn't matter that they think that I might have the intent to harm as long as I don't have the intent to harm them, as long as I didn't wake up that day and say, I feel like going out and attacking people. Like, that is somehow relevant?
Or harm, they had a different purpose. Their purpose was, in their minds probably, I don't know because I haven't talked to them, safeguarding, the police station, the area.
You haven't even talked to the officers about this? At this point, it had been, I think, at least a week when I made this phone call since the incident. And this internal affairs guy who is supposed to be investigating this hasn't even talked to the officers.
Police station. So though it may have been misguided intention, I don't think there was any intent to, I don't think they started their shift saying, hey, let's see who we can batter today, and then they encountered you. They were summoned there by the first person that saw you guys on the sidewalk. So they were just handling their other calls when they got called to that scene. So it's not as if they had some specific intent to batter anybody that day. Well, we could talk about this all day. Like I said, you're free to pursue that if you feel strongly that a crime occurred. That's your prerogative.
Well, yeah, and that's why I'm just asking these questions, because I don't.
A question I'll note that he clearly doesn't want to answer because he understands that it gets to the very core, the very heart of the issue of why these police officers need to be criminally charged. He doesn't want to engage any further down this avenue. He's trying to get away and trying to say, we could talk about this all day. Even though we've already talked 51 minutes, I just don't want to talk for another, 2 minutes, because we could talk about this all day. Well, excuse me, but I'm just trying to get this question answered, because I'm pretty sure that if I did what the police officers did, then I would be sitting in a jail cell. At worst, I would be facing criminal charges, and I would be required to go to court, because if I didn't show up for court, then a warrant would be issued for my arrest. So, shouldn't the same standard be applied even if people have a badge? Because ultimately, I can make my own badge and put it on me and go out and say, yep, I have the authority to do this because I have a badge, and oh, by the way, I wrote in this notebook some rules that I'm requiring you to follow, and yep, so I'm just doing my job. But the key here is evidence of jurisdiction. What evidence is there? What factual evidence exists that this person has the right to order you to do something, to touch you with immunity, to try to force you to the ground or direct you to the ground with immunity when there's a deadly weapon at their waist? What authority exists? Where is the evidence of that authority? It doesn't exist.
I don't care what the intent was, and I don't necessarily believe, that they woke up that day and said, hey, let's go assault people. But I'm just asking, if I were to go out with a gun at my waist and just find some person on the sidewalk minding their own business and grab them by the arm and try to direct them to the ground and then tell them they can't leave, I'm just wondering, would that constitute a crime in your eyes, and what crime would that be?
Yeah, we'd probably respond out. We'd probably take the crime report if the person said, I want to file battery charges. 240.
He's ignoring the question because I'm trying to get a name. I'm trying to get what they call that crime. Like, I know it's a crime. I know it's like some kind of trespass, or it's assault or battery or something. And I'm just trying to figure out what his answer is. What is the legalese in Oxnard, California answer of what type of crime is this. And he's ignoring the question by saying, oh yeah, police officers would probably come out, and if the person wanted to file battery charges, then blah, blah, blah. Well, what if that person asked, what are my options for what kinds of charges that I can file based upon this happening? You know, maybe they don't want to file battery charges. Maybe there's some other crime that it is that they want to file charges for. That's what I'm trying to figure out, and of course he's trying to ignore the question.
The penal code, because this person arbitrarily came up to me, grabbed my arm, and moved me over here. We would file a crime report and send it up to the district attorney's office, and they would review it and decide on whether or not it was in their interests or ability to file that case.
Okay, but there's no...
So if you, in that line of thinking, if you want to pursue that, then by all means, pursue it.
Okay, well, so assuming that were to happen, would you have arrested me on the scene if I were still there? Like, if I have a gun and grab somebody's arm?
If you're carrying a gun, that would be, you know, if you didn't have a permit to carry a gun or you brandished the gun, that would be a more severe crime, and that would equate to an arrest, a physical arrest. But absent that, then no, it would likely be a summons, a cite and release on the scene saying, here's your court date. By signing this, you agree to appear in court, and that way the DA's office looks at the case and decides whether they file it or not.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time. I don't believe I have any further questions. Do you have any further questions?
I should have kept him to the questions that I was asking rather than allow him to deflect the questions, but I figured it probably wasn't going to go much further, and I kind of wanted to try to keep it as friendly as possible.
No, if I do, I will call you, and if you have a chance to email me the video, it would probably be too large to send on email, but if I can get a thumb drive, or if you have a way to zip the file or anything like that, or a link, etc., and then I'll be calling you, or how would you prefer the disposition letter? Would you prefer an email with an attachment?
Yeah, the email with the attachment is best, and then I can always call if I have further questions.
Okay, and do I have your phone number? I don't think I do.
Not unless...
do I?
No, you probably don't. I can give it to you, though.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
I just want to make sure that giving you my phone number, it's not going to be used for any searches or anything like that, is it?
So I'm going to stop it here so that my phone number isn't played, but basically I gave him my phone number. He said no, it won't be used for searches. I only asked that because oftentimes if you put your phone number down on a police document, then they are able to get your name, address, where you live, and your phone carrier, and sometimes they even issue warrants to acquire information based upon that phone number. They can even figure out where you have been just by having your phone number. So I don't necessarily advise handing it out. However, I am sort of transparent as much as I can be, so I'm just gonna stop the call here. But yeah, I just gave him my phone number and then we hung up. So bye. Okay, so there was actually one more thing that I wanted to have listened to after I gave him my phone number. Just one little last about 42 seconds of the call.
So.
Okay, and did you used to be a police officer, or are you currently a police officer?
Yes, I'm currently a police officer. I'm a sergeant. I happen to be working internal affairs at the present moment, and I have 29 years experience.
Okay, and do you work When you weren't in internal affairs, were you working in the Oxnard Police Department?
Yes, I've been working here for 13 years.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, take care.
Yep, you too. Bye-bye.
What was that?
Okay, so I just wanted to play that part because it shows that he was a police officer. He still is a police officer. He was a police officer at Oxnard Police Department. So there is sort of this possible conflict of interest. And it could explain why he didn't want me to, file criminal charges, or why he tried to dissuade me from filing criminal charges. It could explain that quite a bit. So thank you everyone for your patience. Have a good day.